Hello, I'm not saying bello anymore. Hello and welcome to The Quest for the Best, a show where I talk about stuff I've been watching lately, good or bad. In this video I'm going to be talking about Tenet, Feels Good Man, Mulan, and Sputnik. Check the timecodes if you want to jump around to anything in particular. Before we get too deep into this, I heard that Christopher Nolan shaves his area with one of these, the Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer, as part of the Manscaped Perfect Package 3.0. The Mower 3.0 provides a comfortable ergonomic design and quality ceramic blades built with advanced skin-safe technology, so no nasty snags or injuries on your sensitive little sack, and that's guaranteed. Featuring a premium lithium-ion battery, a built-in LED light that illuminates grooming areas for a closer, more precise trim, compact anti-tug adjustable trimmer guards, and a rapid charging dock powered by USB, which means it's cordless and waterproof, which is perfect for the shower. Go to manscaped.com/IHE and get 20% off instantly applied at checkout. So for this section on Tenet, I'm actually joined by my bro, Jamie Jar Jim. Hello. I don't like it when YouTube channels like randomly include people who you're not like subscribed for. Right. But I think in this instance it's fine because the joke is
because it's me.
Because it's you. Yeah, we have the same voice. We're basically the same person at this point. So.
Yeah, and I did make IHE. To be fair,
yeah,
like it was my brainchild.
Yeah, and if it annoys you, just close your eyes and just imagine that everything that's being said is just me. So I'll just get credit as long as your observations are good and don't annoy people. I'll be happy with that. But we're talking about Christopher Nolan's latest movie, Tenet. It's a PG-13, 2.5 hours long, pretty lengthy. He likes his big awe-inspiring epics. It's kind of an action, sci-fi, espionage, spy movie, mostly, kind of channeling that James Bond stuff from his childhood that he's always loved. There have always been like these rumors of what would Christopher Nolan's James Bond look like if he ever got the chance to make one, and we basically kind of get that here with Tenet. I'd say the hook of the movie, aside from all the spy espionage stuff we've seen hundreds of times before, it's the Nolan time manipulation spin that really gives it its own personality.
Yeah, I'm much happier to see this than just Christopher Nolan's version of James Bond or something.
Oh yeah,
he's always best when he's got his own stuff.
I much prefer the fact that it's an original concept, especially with this idea I was reading about where he didn't screen any of the kind of movies that he normally does when he's starting production. Like with Interstellar, he probably screened 2001 and stuff like that. But here, instead of screening James Bond movies, they wanted people to channel, well, not people, the cast to channel how they remember Bond movies in their head. So it's that kind of... Everyone knows what a spy movie is for them in the back of their mind, and it's nice to just channel that energy without specifically referencing or doing the kind of shit you'd expect, while also including stuff like that. There's a fun scene early on that's very James Bondy where they kind of have a scientist, tech type person dropping a bit of exposition, establishing those early concepts and ideas, and going off from there. But before we actually talk about the story or the characters in any more depth, I actually want to briefly talk about how weird the movie experience of going to a cinema was, because I guess it's the first time since quarantine and the whole COVID thing that I've been to the theatre, and we went across the Magic Roundabout in good old Swindon to get to one, and it was a ghost town. The room had, 6 to 8 people in there. It was pretty empty.
Yeah, because like you say, it would have been before March the last time we could have gone to a cinema.
I barely go to the cinema in the early part of the year anyway, because it's usually just trash that's come out. Yeah, as far as the actual movie's concerned, I've kind of fallen off Nolan a little bit the last few years. It was, for me, ever since Interstellar, I was kind of starting to switch off from some of his gimmicks, which I was starting to get tired of, and it's kind of similar in this movie where he doesn't seem to care too much about characters specifically, and it's more about exploring these concepts, exploring these huge ideas and presenting them in a really exciting kind of, overbearing is not the right way, but it's like very exaggerated and intense in a way to try and overwhelm you, and that's either really effective or falls quite flat for me.
Yeah, I think overwhelming, particularly with this movie, sort of is the key word.
Yeah.
Because there is a line in the movie that's like, don't even think about it. Don't try to understand what's happening.
Yes, and that was something I really appreciated, because this movie actually kept reminding me of Mission Impossible Fallout. There's a very similar moment in that movie where I think Tom Cruise is obviously sprinting somewhere, and he's like talking to Simon Pegg about like, who am I even chasing at this point? It's like, it doesn't even matter, just go that way or whatever. It's like, it's a similar idea where it is just about stringing a bunch of set pieces together and using the spy espionage kind of coolness of it to keep you entertained and engaged, because the main character, played by John David Washington, is the lead, who I'd say they give just enough for me to kind of like him as a main character and to, you know, draw the whole story out, because he gives a very physical performance. He's always doing like push-ups and exercise, and I think he does a lot of the stunts himself, so he has a very physical presence. But as far as his actual character is concerned, it's mostly a mystery until the very end type stuff, where they reveal a bit more about him.
Yeah.
But as far as an intriguing main character is concerned, it's really not about that. He is just kind of a vehicle for the action to move things forward.
I think he was a really good casting decision, because
he's got the voice, he's got the suaveness,
voice, charisma,
the look and everything.
You sort of just like him from the get-go.
And you buy that he would be chosen for this special task of saving the world and all that, because I feel like some of the silliness that comes with Nolan and that over-the-top nature sometimes can clash when it's like really heady, Interstellar type stuff, kind of clashing with that super scale and the action kind of bombasticness. And I feel like the spy espionage thing works really well for that type of storytelling and the hugeness of it all, because there's loads of locations. It moves constantly. Scenes are quite short, actually. Yeah. Just how much stuff is going on and how much is being explained to you, and it is messy, like the journey.
Yeah.
But I'm conflicted, because part of the messiness is completely by design, and it's kind of overwhelming and confusing you, because as it reveals the plot to you, things start to retroactively make sense, because it shows you things that are from your future that you won't understand until the future of the movie. So that has led obviously to a lot of confusion and people being like, am I dumb for not understanding this movie? But no, you're not dumb. It is kind of told in a confusing way at times, and I really think I hope it will come together a bit better on a second viewing, which I actually really want to do, because
me too.
Which says a lot for me.
I don't want to go to the cinema for it.
I don't want to rush back to necessarily risk getting a virus to see it. I'd very much like to watch it in the comfort of my own home with subtitles, because the audio mixing was so very Christopher Nolan on steroids.
Yeah.
It's been a joke since The Dark Knight Rises about the audio mixing, and the early screenings for that plane scene in The Dark Knight Rises just had audio that you couldn't understand. And I guess it's just been his thing. He likes mixing the audio so loud. He likes the sound effects and to overwhelm.
Of course, he had to write in a plot point that characters have to wear masks 50% of the time. So they're all talking like this, and you can barely hear what they're saying, with the music playing really loud, so you can't hear
and
extra.
From what I understand, his logic is it forces you to focus on the movie more. Yeah. Whereas for me, it kind of has the opposite, where it makes me more confused by what I'm seeing, because I don't understand it clearly.
Because you can't hear the dialogue, and there are scenes where the characters surely can hear each other talking, because they're having a coherent conversation, but in the movie we can't hear what they're saying. So to me, that's a problem. It takes you out of that immersion experience and makes you feel like an outsider, sort of only getting 70% of what's being actually said.
And as far as the Nolanisms go, one of the major ones that was annoying me the most was just some of that kind of fluffy dialogue that he likes. I wasn't the most keen on the main character referring to himself as the protagonist and kind of meta stuff like that. I didn't really enjoy that.
Yeah, that was sort of really on the nose.
That seemed very goofy, very silly, even more like Mission Impossible-y type kind of silliness. But honestly, I feel like I'm giving this movie a huge pass because of how ridiculously exciting those action scenes are. And for an espionage spy movie, I gave like Mission Impossible Fallout like the same excuse. But here you have much more interesting concepts with the the way the movie wraps into itself with the timeline. And ever since Memento, Christopher Nolan's really, one of the most interesting things about him and his style is just the way he's obsessed with time, and the timeline of a movie is a very interesting thing to play with.
Yeah, I think the way the movie works, because like you say, there are these multiple timelines, having the storyline sort of attached to the protagonist. So when he's going forward, then back, then forward, then back, you're stuck to this character on that timeline, instead of it being scenes like being jumping in time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There is like a linear timeline of the main character.
I suppose it helps subconsciously kind of keep you along with the ride.
Yeah.
And not overwhelm you too much, even though now and again it does slip out of your grasp and you're like, wait, what's going on? I would say especially the final action sequence. It's really interesting, the ideas they're playing with, but it's such a over-the-top bombastic sequence. I was getting a bit lost in it. But again, I hope that is a bit clearer on a second watch now that I kind of know what to anticipate a bit more. What was your favourite one of the huge set pieces? Because there's a surprising amount to choose from, because it does just jump around and move so fast. You got the plane one, you got that one on the highway. There's all sorts of action to choose from.
Honestly, I would have said the plane one, but even though the scale is sort of drawn back for the car chase on the highway.
Yeah.
As soon as they're being chased by this car driving backwards, for that car it's going forward in time, but for them, this car is basically reversing, chasing them. Something about that just clicked with me, and I think it's a super interesting.
There's a certain point in the movie where the kind of loops that go back on themselves start to kind of pay off in ways that are like, that was that thing from earlier, and some of them are really obvious, but others are less so, and I found certain parts of it to be quite unpredictable in terms of where it was going, aside from the whole, the world-ending stakes and good guys versus bad guys kind of stuff. It's not like the deepest Christopher Nolan movie by any means. I think it's just has a very specific goal of being like a espionage spy action thriller, and interpreted with Christopher Nolan's like commitment to that live action practical stuff without, because he says, I watched the little behind the scenes 9-minute kind of thing they released, the featurette, and he says, audiences are always aware on some level of things that are animated, and I do agree with that. And definitely. I think it really does help the movie and does help that sense of scope and scale, because you're never once thinking, oh, that looked shit. Like every single effects shot or stunt shot, or we give Batman Begins shit for the like fist fighting and how unsatisfying and not really Batman that is, but in this movie some of the stunts with the way it has some people going like backwards in time and others in forwards, it's very well choreographed with that kind of stuff.
Even with a conventional fight scene relatively early on in the film, he's going through a kitchen and just using everything in his environment to that scene is done really well.
He's showing how good of an action director he can be.
He really proved himself here, because like he's obviously done great action before, but not in that sort of tight scale.
I can never really think of the fist fighting stuff. I guess there's that bit in Inception with the hallway, but that doesn't really count.
That's all about the movement, the set moving, not about what the people are really doing, as impressive as that is.
So while the plot's kind of clunky and there's a lot of like characters that don't have much depth, and there's parts like when Robert Pattinson, who we haven't mentioned yet, he just kind of appears in the movie, and again, that's something that's kind of by design, but it does seem kind of weird sometimes.
I think they needed a bit more dialogue just to establish who he was.
But again, they couldn't do that because of his place in the story, because there's like certain secrets they can't reveal. But I mean, even to the extent because the main character is to do with the CIA. Robert Pattinson is an English guy. Like, who even is he? He's probably the character that disappointed me the most. I was kind of anticipating him being in it a bit more.
And having more to do.
It's really not about him. He's more just like an agent that shows up now and again to help out, and he's just a side character, and there's a lot of really random cameos and side characters, actually. Aaron Taylor Johnson shows up. He was Quicksilver in the Avengers.
Yeah, Kick-Ass.
Yeah, Kick-Ass, yeah.
Right.
Who a lot of people will know him as. Who's just kind of a small role, and he's bearded too, and I didn't recognise him, and I was like, is that him? Is that not? Is that just an actor that looks like him?
Looked like Tom Hardy.
Oh, really?
In that role. I don't know why, but yeah. To me, there's one character in the movie that is actually like a character.
That has like
sort of has wants and desires and
a
goal to achieve. And an arc.
And a person and something to overcome. I know who you're going to say. It's the mother character from Widows, right? Elizabeth Debicki. Yeah, I liked her. She's sort of the heart of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
As you say, she's the kind of only one with a sense of depth. What did you feel about the villain of the movie? He's quite mustache twirling.
Yeah, I did not like the villain.
The Russian baby.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Branagh.
that's a cliche already.
Yeah.
He's like a Russian that had a real tough upbringing and a hard history or whatever. It's a problem when you want the stakes, like with any espionage sort of film. The stakes always have to be miles high. And then when the motivation doesn't like fit mile high stakes,
it's hard to justify.
It just feels awkward and unrealistic and inhuman. That's sort of Christopher Nolan's problem with characters.
They're just like tools to get a plot in motion.
Exactly.
Sometimes, yeah.
So the villain to me, again, I thought the actor was good and convincing, but
and learning to speak Russian backwards as an English person must have been quite difficult.
He's English, is he?
Kenneth Branagh, yeah, he's very English. You know, he's in El Dorado. He's the blonde one in El Dorado.
No way.
Yeah. No, go back and watch that movie. It's bizarre.
Guy. Holy moly! Again, the actor did a great job, but it's just the writing.
And there's almost like no time with the way he writes his movies. Ironically, there's no time to spend developing characters because. Honestly, this is something that I think could really work as like a mini-series or something, like an 8-episode mini-series with, if it had all the action, but at the same time had more fleshed out characters, it could be something like really awesome. Mm-hmm. But as this, it's just kind of a cool standalone, high-concept action thriller with the commitment to visuals in a way that the average action movie isn't.
Going back to that plane scene, there's nothing like it I've ever seen on film before.
Mm-mm. The only reason I kept being reminded of Mission Impossible Fallout was because that movie had a similar kind of hook where it was like Tom Cruise just being mental, jumping off rooftops and flying helicopters by himself and stuff like that, because I thought that helicopter sequence was very impressive in a similar way in Mission Impossible Fallout. But it's just not grounded in a sci-fi world that's quite as cool as Tenet was, because it was really slick. It did nail that kind of Bond but not Bond, you know, where it's like these guys, they're suave, they're cool, you kind of trust in what they're doing, you kind of believe they're the good guys, and the mustache twirling bad guys have to be stopped, and you know, all the kind of shit like that. I don't know what more I could really ask for aside from a bit deeper characters, really, and you know, subtitles and a bit of mixing so I could understand what was going on a bit clearer.
No, that's the thing. I think on a technical level and on just trying to do something new and different that people haven't seen before, but he knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
But it's that basic stuff that did he write this film alone?
I'm pretty sure, and he's been writing it for a couple decades almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of plot where it would just take so long.
Just the technicality of it, yeah.
But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but ever since his brother stopped writing the movies with him, on a character level, they seem to have suffered.
Yeah, I feel the same. Because when I think Christopher Nolan, I really don't think of characters. I think of moments where you're like on the edge of the seat, and I think of like the docking scene in Interstellar, or the highway scene in The Dark Knight, or there's like loads of moments like that, but I don't really think about the depth of the characters particularly, unless it's one of his earlier things like Memento or The Prestige or something like that. I gave this one a 4-star out of 5 on Letterboxd, which I was kind of torn between a 3.5 or fucking 7 or 8, you know. I was torn between that kind of level, and that about lines up with kind of the general read. I'm a bit higher with the 8, I think.
So mine's 3.5 stars, so 7.
Yeah, okay.
So slightly lower than you. And to me, it is my gripe with him for ages.
I don't know why it doesn't bother me more, but for some reason this time it just really won me over.
Yeah, for a movie of this scale, and I'm a real sucker for time travel stuff. It really lets you just focus on that important part of the film, the experimental stuff.
Yeah.
But maybe a second viewing will bump it up to an 8.
Yeah, I'm hoping it stays where it is and doesn't go down, but we'll see. Yeah, any final words, bro, before I move on and you disappear?
No.
So let's talk about Feels Good Man. This is a documentary directed by Arthur Jones, all about the internet meme Pepe the Frog. We're actually at a point where very legitimate, well-made documentaries are being made about the prevalence and relevance of memes. And the whole story behind Pepe is so dramatic and political at this point that the story does deserve a documentary being made about it. The whole thing is very interesting. With all the news stories and, as I say, this political side to it, it really adds an informative nature to it, because I've got to be honest, my Pepe lore was kind of all over the place, so this really helps straighten it out. It goes into the whole origin with the artist Matt Fury, who started creating this silly little comic, and the real intrigue of the story is kind of how the internet can take things and make it into its own and warp the original intent. And what does that mean? What if we created? And is there more responsibility on the artist? It doesn't feel one-sided or like it's biased towards anyone in particular. It just presents the story, is critical when it needs to be. And honestly, one of my favorite things about it was the visual flair. It's always nice when a documentary puts in that extra bit of effort to make the actual presentation flow really nicely. For example, the film is full of these wonderfully animated little shorts all in the same style as that original comic. This is the kind of movie that would be great to show anyone who's always asking you, you know, from the older generations that always want to know,
oh, what is a meme anyway? How do you describe a meme?
This documentary would do a pretty good job of explaining what a meme is, how it can catch on, and kind of the whole concept. The way they describe it in the documentary is this Darwinian attempt for attention, which I thought was quite a good description. But the ultimate story of this stoner, basically, who likes drawing cartoon frogs, eventually somehow being adopted into this alt-right symbol of hatred, and the lawsuits and the kind of ironic humor of it all. Because it took me a while to settle into the documentary, because the fact it exists in and of itself is kind of absurd. And that's what the whole thing is about. It's just an insane story that this is the reality we live in. And it doesn't hold back from showing some of the more offensive examples, which is key for proving the whole story of what happened with the character and the way it has been used. But they're talking about the great meme war and meme magic, and they have these meme experts that they interview. It's all very ridiculous, but you can't stop watching. It's inherently fascinating. The whole story is just a wonderful thing to hear. It has happiness, it has sadness, and there's this warped idea of this innocent creator making something bigger than him. And he can't control it, but he made it and he'll always be associated with it. I found it to be very well made, very informative, very relevant, and proves that you can make a documentary about silly memes as long as there's an interesting story to tell. I would really recommend watching this. It's not very long, it's only an hour and a half, which flew by for me. I rated this at 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. So Mulan 2020, the remake of the Disney Renaissance movie, which I rewatched before watching this new one just to refresh my memory and to remind myself of what is good about the original property to begin with. There's a lot of style to that original movie. The art direction is very good, the character design is very good. Obviously the animation itself is incredibly intricate, so many frames. It's wonderful to watch. It's a beautiful film. And behind the imagery, there's a fair amount of oomph to the messaging of the story. It's nice. It's about treating everyone as equals and not letting society hold you back to what you believe is true. And on top of that, you also have those musical numbers, which are brilliant. The movie's nice and short, it speeds by. Sure, it's got its Disney kind of cliches, but Mulan is one of the better ones, I'd say, from the 90s Disney era. But as far as this new one goes, honestly, it has kind of the same issues as did Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King and Jungle Book. Not as bad in Jungle Book, that's probably the better one of these reboots. But before I even talk about the movie proper, I do want to say that this entire project is a travesty. Forget the fact that Disney doesn't seem to give a single shit about smearing its own legacy, taking the most basic, boring underlying concepts and ideas for their classic movies and reinventing them without any of the charm, style, succinctness, or heart that made us fans of these properties to begin with. The, quite frankly, disgusting politics that this film will always represent to me is a good reminder of where Disney's priorities lie. Flipping a story that should be about resilience, justice, and strength and warping it into a vile representation of everything that is wrong with these film megacorps. Utterly spineless with complete disregard for ethics or morality. So this was directed by Nikki Caro, hope I'm saying her name right, who is a fellow Kiwi who you might know from Whale Rider or I guess The Zookeeper's Wife. I haven't seen that, but I remember liking Whale Rider as a kid. But to be honest, I can't say that this film has much of a voice at all. You wouldn't really know who the director was just by watching the movie. And that's the problem with these factory-produced algorithm movies. I like saying the nostalgia algorithm directed this movie, because so much of it is ripped away from that original story, and I hear people say, oh no, they're going for a more kind of traditional interpretation of this tale and removing all the Disneyisms. But in doing that, they didn't replace it with some new dynamic, some new voice that's going to tell the story in a way that's reinterpreted in a fresh outlook. Because I just don't understand who these films are for, because they rely, at times, quite heavily on your knowledge of that original 90s animated movie, using the subversion of what you expect from that 90s movie as a dramatic beat in the movie itself, so that it doesn't even really exist as its own story. Because every set piece that was storyboarded and planned out in that original 90s movie, like the avalanche sequence or the invasion of the city at the end, it's night and day. The animators and all the visual people from that original movie, that's what was so good about this 2D animation, was their artists, they have an eye for what makes an image striking and memorable. That avalanche sequence in the original has some incredible, extremely complex perspective animation that blows my mind. These films used to be about flexing a specific skill. They were supposed to be showing off, yeah, we're the best in the world at this type of animation. And I don't know what the point is of this 2020 version, aside from, just like Lion King, just like Jungle Book, just like Beauty and the Beast, banking in on this nostalgia and IP recognition. Because they, genuinely, every one of these movies does the exact same thing. They add about 30 minutes of pointless, meaningless exposition. All the storytelling, all the added storytelling is done through this comatose dialogue. Like, they added a villain to the movie. The bird from the originals, like a shape-shifting woman in this one. And they tried to do this yin and yang type interplay with the main character and her. They're supposed to be a mirror image of each other, but going down to separate paths, kind of like the dynamic in the far superior Kung Fu Panda 2, but they don't explore it in any way, even going as far as to do the whole "we are the same, you and I" type dialogue. It's just, I expect a bit more out of these productions, these $200 million productions. It's not the concept of remaking these old movies that I have a problem with, it's the way they do it, the execution. Look at what we've had so far. What are the classic scenes or memorable lines or visual imagery that you remember from these movies? Nothing, or it's just something copied from the original. These really piss me off. I just don't get the point of them. There's no presence to anything. Everything's really awkward. It takes itself weirdly seriously and then tries to have some comedic beats that reflect the original, but it falls so flat because the tone is just, it's not there. And the same thing with the score. They just use beats from that original soundtrack that you already know. It's like cheating. They even miss the point of most of the characters too. There's a surprising amount of depth to some of the dynamics in that original movie. Mulan has the conflict with her dad and the conflict with the army guy who's like really hot. The whole squad is much more memorable. It works, it fits. The story is simple enough and clean enough to work for an animated movie for children. They don't feel like they're making this movie out of a passion for filmmaking or storytelling.
It's coming from the most cynical market-chasing trend. It's just a trend. Every time they try and adapt one of these 90-minute animated features into a 2-hour live-action spectacle, it has murdered the pacing in all of them. I think they just flow horrendously. They're trying to hit certain beats that are designed around an animated tale, which gives you a lot more freedom, honestly, in terms of the way you want to present the movie. So bringing that into live action, you have to completely change the entire setup of the way you present something in a 3D space. And you can storyboard a live action movie in just as slick a way as you can an animated movie, but that's what I'm saying, they're lacking that creativity. All of these movies look identical. You could just show random shots of action from any of these movies and they're all just squirted out of an algorithm on a computer. I'm sick of it. And to be fair, this one, it's not as bad as Lion King. To me, that's the most egregious one so far. And it's less notable than Aladdin because it just doesn't have the meme factor. There's nothing even really fun to joke about the movie. There's that one part at the end where the Ho-Oh flies behind Mulan and she looks cool and epic and stuff. That was memed a bit, but by that time you get to the 30-minute fight scene at the end, I was so checked out. I honestly nearly gave up an hour in because it's one of the worst things about these movies. They're just so dull. They are so boring. The scene construction is so bad. There's just nothing memorable about them. Yeah, I couldn't stand this. 1 star. Okay, let's end on this movie, Sputnik, which, to be honest, I can't even remember how I found. But you can watch this on, well, in the UK at least, on YouTube even. It's out on digital. But it's a pretty small production, be wary of that. It's kind of a really well-done B-movie. This is a $2.6 million budget approximately, according to IMDb, converted from about 190 million ruble. And honestly, from the poster, it does make it look worse than it is. I wish that poster was better, because it does look like any other B-movie trash that is shit out every day. But the director, Igor Abramenko, I think this is his first picture, and he did a really good job. I was overall quite surprised by how good this was, and how it actually explored ideas relating to aliens that, you know, live inside you and take you over and stuff like that, in ways that I found to be kind of novel and fresh, and used in psychological ways I'd never really considered before that were quite smart. It was just cute in that way. You do see a lot of the alien creature in it, which is, I think for the budget, is impressive. I don't love some of the choices with the way they showed it. Sometimes it looked really obvious, and whether you like the design of the alien or not is kind of down to you, but the actual hook of the movie is actually quite cool. The movie's set in Soviet Russia, which already is an interesting setting for a story like this. So seeing this take on the Russian government kind of trying to do tests on this man to figure out what's going on with this alien life form. They flesh it out just enough for it to be a fun ride, and I'm kind of really sick of B-movie-ish alien type movies that are trying to go for that alien body horror type stuff. Considering the production, the first time director coming from Russia, I think there's a lot of promise, and I'd like to see some more money thrown at this guy. It's definitely limited in ways. Most of the movie's set in a small selection of locations. It's fairly short, but for this type of movie, I think it's about spot on, to be honest. It's not really revolutionizing anything or blowing my mind particularly, but if you're a fan of this kind of horror spin on creatures that come from outer space and infect your body, or, you know, do kind of all sorts of horrendous things to your biology, then you'll probably get a kick out of it. This is much better than something like Life, which is going for a similar sort of vibe. Much less Hollywood and silly, although in saying that there's still a lot of silliness in it, obviously, as it being the scale and subject matter that it is. But I settled on a 3.5 stars for this one. I did really enjoy it. Its limitations are obvious and it's fairly simple, but it does flesh things out just enough for my liking. Check it out if you can. So that's everything we're going to be talking about for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to present this show. I hope you don't mind me just messing with it each time to see what works and what doesn't. Make sure you check out Jar Media if you want some antics with me and my brother. And for a bit more serious discussion, head over to Sardonicast, which is kind of like a book club but for movies. My next video should be a search for the worst on something I've wanted to cover for a long time. I'll see you soon. Bye!